Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Adapt podcast with Danette FM. I'm Jez FM, the podcast producer, and this is, of course, a companion podcast to the awesome book, The Adaptable Leader by Danette Fenton-Menzies. And so who else would be here with me other than Danette Fenton-Menzies? So, Danette, how are you going?
Yeah, great, Jez. My girls are telling me that they're hungry. And so apologise for the weird noise in the back. That's the guinea fowl and the chickens that are telling us that, they want to be fed. They do this several times a day.
That's okay. So today we talked to Sophie, who has worked at the UN, and so this topic about connecting globally, I think in terms of adaptability going forward, is a really crucial technique. So I guess I'm going to throw to you, Danette, any sort of initial thoughts on the topic of connecting globally and your conversation with Sophie?
Yeah, so this was a great conversation. And one of the things that it highlighted for me is the importance of being intentional about not just having a network that's a small type network. It needs to be a global network where you're sharing and others are sharing with you to expand your worldview, because obviously things are changing in different countries at different times. And the wonderful thing about a really good network, if you are being generous with that network, is you'll get access to business intel that you may not necessarily know about in your country. And so I really liked her deliberate nature in terms of networking and constantly evolving your network as well, and the generosity in terms of that networking. So a great conversation. Hope the listeners love it. Sophie, great to have you on today. And I'd love for you to introduce yourself to our Adapt with Danette FM audience, because they may not know about you yet.
Thank you, Danette. So I am Sophie Krantz. I am based in Melbourne. So I am originally from Australia, but I've lived overseas for several years, several times. So I think of myself as a global citizen, but I'm also a global strategist. And what's that? So I see the world, there's kind of two worlds we're living in. One world is quite stuck. There's a lot that isn't working in the world, but I'm obsessed with what is working. Nice. And where to find it. And so that's kind of what I do. I figure out, what's working in the world. So for an example is in every 25 years, the global economy doubles. And so by 2050, there'll be $90 trillion more GDP. So what's working? Where's that value being created and who's capturing it? And so that's what I do. I help businesses to understand that and to play a part in it, play this bigger game in creating and capturing the value. And I'm pleased to say that the not so secret to that is that it rests on solving really big problems in the world.
Nice.
Because in this digitally connected world, solutions do scale. So that builds on my personal drive to make the world's amazing, but it's kind of crap for millions of people. Yep. So let's make the world better, and business should and can and does play a really important part of that.
Yeah, lovely. And that background, because Sophie's also been on the Magical Learning podcast. And when I was talking to Sophie on that podcast, I was like, Sophie would be perfect for this podcast, just in terms of sharing those global insights. And I love your opportunity/possibility thinking versus the doom thinking. And I apologise to listeners. I've got a little bit of a cold, so I've got a strep in my mouth as we're talking so I don't cough all over the place. So, Sophie, let's start with the first question, which is, what do you do that helps you to adapt?
I think it is the possibility thinking, Danette. We get to choose the news and the narrative that makes up our day. And that makes up our life, doesn't it? And so we get up in the morning, we pick up our phone, we're connected 24/7. It feels that way a lot of the time. But we get to choose, who do we spend our time with and what informs us and what creates the worldview that the lens, if you like, that we see the world and we see possibilities. And for me, several years ago, I decided that I'd become a little bit of an expert in what wasn't working in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So the dream job was, as many small children around the world, the dream job was to work in the UN. So in my 20s, I got a job in international economic development, and it was a really fantastic opportunity to learn what is broken and not working in the world, but what is desperately needed to work in the world.
Yep.
But I decided that I didn't want to be an expert in what's not working, and it just wasn't an option to be okay with it, to just be in the system that doesn't work. And so for me, adapting it is a bit of an obsession to find what is working. There has to be stuff working in the world. What is it? Where is it? What is it? I want to unpack it, understand it, distill it, and enable others to understand it and to really amplify their ambition.
Yes.
What's working, and accelerate their agency, make it accessible for more people in more places.
Nice. Oh, I love that passion. That's gorgeous. Exactly why I asked you to come and join us. So then, obviously part of life is failure. So there's, when we adapt, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. How do you deal with failure when it happens?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Failure, what is failure? I think failure is a very personal thing, isn't it? And it's, as we get older, we can track maybe at the time what felt like failure, but then as we get older, wiser, we can track it as part of the evolution and the learning. And when I came back to Australia after living overseas for 10 years, I wasn't allowed to do things that I was doing. I was told, oh no, Sophie, you're too junior to meet with ministers, but I'd been meeting them for the last 5-7 years. No, you can't put your name on board papers. It's your work, but your name can't be on it. And at the time, it was frustration / failure, a little bit of what have I done? What have I done making this decision to be here to do this? And then it's just a realization that we live in a world where we don't always have complete control, of course. We can't control the workplace we're in, we can't control the situations we're in. And so failure at the time can be quite devastating when we don't step into the potential that we think we have or that a situation presents. And so a big shift in my personal view and way of operating in the world is to adopt one of experimentation. And there's a framework that I use, the Exponential Organisation framework, developed by Salim Ismail. He studied 200 unicorns, 200 of the world's fastest growing companies, to identify what do they do. And there are 11 things that they do. And one of them is experiment, like relentless experimentation. And it really shifted my approach to so many things, but just a lightness. I'm going to try this within certain parameters that I'm comfortable with, and I'm going to experiment and measure and learn and improve. And so therefore it's never failure, because momentum is what's really important. And so now when I'm working with clients and I insist on experimentation, one of my key drivers is to say, if you are standing still, that worries me. We're only going to progress with movement and momentum. And to do that, we need to experiment. So stepping into the bigger space, and it might be scary, but I think it's scarier to stand still in this world. Yeah.
Totally. So that's given me another idea for a question. How do you deal with those people that are really stuck? They don't know how to get that momentum because perhaps they're super comfortable, or they just can't even see how to do the experimentation and be okay with it maybe not working as they wanted?
Yeah, really great question. There are a couple of key things. The sort of foundation setting is why experimentation works. And so some evidence of how experiments are run around the world by people like them to get different outcomes in their roles. So it could be, so there's typically, like, a really simple experiment is to look at, in their role, do ideas win over hierarchy? And if the corporate immune system is attacking and their immune system is alive with new ideas and innovations and they're stopping them from experimenting, it's to say, okay, what if we didn't say no? What if we said, we're going to speak to an expert in this field? What if we widened our scope, widened our worldview to see if it is actually possible? So instead of just the default to no, it's what is possible here?
Yeah.
And so it's meeting them where they are and providing a safe space for them to build some confidence, some muscle, to not have this automatic reaction of no.
Yep. Love that. And I love that, even the what if, that possibility thing, thinking there, but also making it safe for them to, talk to experts, for argument's sake. So it's not just their head on the block when they're bringing up new ideas and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Not expecting anyone to be an expert in something that they don't feel comfortable in, or not feeling alone, or not letting people fail.
Yeah, nice.
Not letting people fail.
Yep. Yeah, and I like that distinction between the experimentation and failure. So failure is the way I think of it is we try something, it doesn't work, we quit. Whereas the experimentation is you're constantly learning new stuff, which allows you to adapt and change to come up with a better way forward. So I really love that idea. Awesome. Thank you. So my next question is, think of a time when things perhaps didn't go so well, and what would have happened if you hadn't have adapted in that situation?
That's a really good question, Danette. I guess a couple of examples are, they are kind of career related.
Yep.
And it's probably sticking around for a little too long. Like there are perks.
Yep.
So working in the UN, for example, like it's a really hard, there are 1 million people a year who apply for jobs in the UN.
Wow. Yep.
And, there's a certain amount of status, and actually the perks are really good, which I don't know that they should be, but they are.
Yep.
And it can be a little bit of a golden cage. And so it's these types of situations, people, I think, do feel very reluctant to move on because they've typically worked very hard to achieve this level of success. But in those situations, it's important to look forward, isn't it? And think, what's the trajectory that I'm on? And I do believe that the world really is changing. And I know it can be a bit cliched. There's disruption. We're living in the time of greatest change. And a lot of people kind of roll their eyes and switch off from it. But I really feel it and believe it.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. And so I feel if I'm sitting pretty and feeling too comfortable, I actually feel really nervous.
Yeah. Which is great because a lot of people get nervous changing, but actually they should be nervous about not adapting, not changing, because you're totally right. I talk in my book about the fact that our half-life of our knowledge, so if we do a degree, depending on what your qualifications are in, half of it's out of date in a very short period of time. And so, and that's only going to speed up.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, Danette. And what I love in the world today is that there are, these people, I call them unusual suspects, doing unexpected things. And so there was a tweet recently that was 17-year-old student discovers a new planet on the 3rd day of internship at NASA.
Wow.
Yeah. And there are these examples of people doing really extraordinary things.
Yep.
And I love that.
Yeah. And how gorgeous is that? Wow. Day 3.
Day 3. What is that person? Hopefully that person's ambition has just skyrocketed. And all the other interns, that's now the benchmark.
Yes.
It's going to happen in that fertile space. This is fabulous.
Yep.
Yeah.
And, contrast that to your experience when you came back and you were told, no, Sophie, no, Sophie, no, Sophie. That whole, I love the phrase, yes, and the whole building on top of stuff. And we need to do that because otherwise, if we're not adapting, we can't support others to adapt as well. And so the more we support others, we have that beautiful collaborative group as well, which is awesome. And I know you do a lot in that space too.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my next question is, what advice would you give your 25-year-old self about being an adaptable leader?
My 25-year-old self, I would, 25, get out there, explore, be an explorer, explore the world. And I love a 25-year-old today can explore the world from, their desktop, their computer, their smartphone. As a 25-year-old, I'm not 25-year-old now, it was a little while ago. So I did have to get out into the world. And I think that the combination of the two is really magical. The ability to, so AI, some people they love it, they hate it. Some people don't really know what they feel about it, but it's the world's mind that we can access. So I would say get out and explore with whatever means, physically, virtually. Ask questions. There's no such thing as a bad question. I know it's a cliche, but ask really great questions to make your own views of the world. And I think that's really important for being adaptable. If I reflect on the first half of slightly over half of my career, it was learning to play the game, the corporate game. And then it took me a couple of years to really try and unlearn it. And so being adaptable to the world, not the situation, the somewhat confined definitions of success. So it's having more almost unapologetic. Yes, being in a respectful, polite way, okay, but no, that's not okay. No, I think there's a bigger game to play, and owning that sooner. I would want that for myself, and I would want that for 25-year-olds the world over.
Nice. And one of the things I talk in my book about is authenticity is super important. So knowing your purpose, knowing your values, knowing your why, and that part of that is that being unapologetic about who you are and what's important to you and why you need to do a particular thing, for argument's sake, and why that's really important. You've just sort of reminded me, and again, it's not on the questions I just shared with you, but I'm really curious because I know one of the things that helps us is working with others, collaborating with others, and I'm curious about your thoughts about people growing their networks in order to help them be a better adaptable leader, just to be a better leader as well.
I love this question, Danette. If you think about the 5 people you have on speed dial and have they changed in the last few years, that's another thing that makes me feel a little nervous.
Love it.
Yeah. And so have lifelong friends, your network's amazing, but is it evolving? Is it changing? Who are the people that get you closer to answers? And in the business world, if it takes you longer than 24 hours to get a response from around the world, you're just not connected. If you can't get an insight, some market intelligence that isn't available from a Google search or a ChatGPT search, if you can't know about an investment outcome, if you can't get an introduction, you're not connected. And it's, that makes me feel nervous. For business students or any students, I mean, look, we are currently in Australia. Many students are, going around the world studying physically or virtually. And I always say when I'm lecturing to students, do not sit with people from your fellow town or country. This is your opportunity to build your network, and they are your peers, but they're also your future competitors. Know them, and you will have this opportunity to collaborate. And I think there's this amazing example of collaboration when COVID hit, and in March 2020 the world shut down, and yet there were these scientists and researchers that sprung into action, and they, within 12 months, or within in 2021, there were several vaccines that were commercialized and being rolled out. And previously it had taken a decade on average for drug discovery and development. So it shows these were scientists that sprung to life to solve a problem. They were connected and they were driven to develop global solutions. And so if you don't have that network, what's the equivalent in your space? I think that's a glaring gap. And then there's also, if you talk about innovation, well, the world's most innovative cities are rising up the ranks. They're in emerging markets, developing countries. What's your network like in those places? I love being based in Australia, but I travel, from time to time. But on any day I'm going, today I'm in Southeast Asia in the US, nice. And, going to so many places from anywhere in the world. And that's because of a network. And I could talk about this all day, Danette. I think it's great. I think it's there is this cliche, this quote, your network is your net worth. It's the one thing you take with you. You take it with you wherever you go, whatever role you're in, whatever company, whatever industry, and your ability to form connections and to create win-win outcomes is absolutely a competitive advantage.
Yep. And so, with networking, some people see networking as a bit sleazy, a bit salesy. Other people see it as what they can take from the network, whereas some people are really about, the giving and that. So I'm curious, because I know you've got great networks. What are some of your tips that you would say if people want to, develop great international networks? What are some of the things you see that really work that, again, can help them work with others to adapt and, make the world a better place because they can solve some of those huge problems?
Yeah. I think it's... a lot of people are put off by it and are quite afraid of, being in a room to network, or even reaching out to new people on LinkedIn to form a connection, like not just to connect, but to form a connection. And my advice is just keep it super simple. Like, why do you want to connect with them? Just say, hi, you're in a part of the world. I'd love to know what's happening in your part of the world. Can we connect and just be really, really human about your desire to understand what's happening in their world and in their part of the world. And then, of course, it's this opportunity to share your learnings, your insights, your lessons, what might help them to achieve their outcomes sooner, easier, more impactfully, sharing of resources, sharing of opportunities. That's also, I think, something that's really easy, particularly as people who embark on sort of this journey of stepping into a bigger space can sometimes leave behind smaller things.
Yep.
Which doesn't mean that they're unimportant things. Yes. And there is an opportunity to share those smaller things with others. And so instead of potentially reaching out to, I know, again, it's sort of a little bit of a cliche, but it is a thing, the boys club or an equivalent, it's to say, well, is there an opportunity for me to provide an opportunity with someone who might not otherwise have this opportunity?
Yep. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, thank you. So is there anything else you'd like to share with the listeners around adaptability and leadership?
Well, something, Danette, that as we've been speaking, another tweet, so you can tell I spend a little bit of time on Twitter. There's another tweet that's come to mind, and it's Naval, an entrepreneur and very successful person in tech, but again, a very human person. And he said something in the last week that is, great people change you, not by expectation, but by inspiration.
Oh, that's powerful.
Yeah. And so who are the people in your world, and how are they inspiring you and lifting you to bolster your ambition, but also to enable you to do more? What's your agency? Are you doing more that is more impactful in your world, in your life, and in the world? And I do believe that it really does boil down to people. We can connect. We're using technology right now. Technology is amazing.
Yes.
You're in another part of Australia than me, and here we are chatting seamlessly. Technology is amazing, but we make our world through our people-to-people interactions. And so in terms of being adaptable, I do think that your network, a network that inspires you, that lifts you, is really key to that.
Oh, I love that. What a beautiful way to end the podcast too. It's awesome. So thank you so much, Sophie, and we will include details about how people can reach out to you on the description for the podcast. I just want to say thank you so much, sending you huge hugs, and I can't wait to catch up in person soon.
What a great conversation once again, Danette. That was so good to listen to. I had a blast listening to it. Did you have any thoughts kind of on today's conversation with Sophie, and I guess sort of talking about connecting globally and everything?
Yeah. So one, I should mention that we first had Sophie on our Magical Learning podcast, and so I'd encourage listeners to also have a listen to that one, because, again, a slightly different perspective, and I'm pretty sure we'll include a link with this podcast link too. I think, our world is expanding so fast, and one of the wonderful things about things like AI, about technology, is that it does allow us to do things differently and also to connect differently. So, I love Sophie's thing where she talked about she used to write to people, like her pen pals and that. And I think that was in the Magical Learning one that we did. And now it's just you can press a button, and that's pretty amazing. So being intentional about what you can bring and share with others, and being generous. One of the things I love about Sophie is she's such a generous, happy and authentic person. It's just extraordinary. So, just love the conversation, and I'm really interested in what some of the listeners have taken away from this podcast.
Absolutely. Me too. I think there's just so much to take away. And I think also one thing that Sophie does so well is when I think people talk about connecting internationally, there's maybe a bit of fear about that. They don't understand the different cultures, they don't understand what business is like. But Sophie really dives into it sort of in a really welcoming way, which I think is really, really nice.
Yeah.
Well, as always, we do have an adapt question for you, Danette. And
Nice.
This one has been sent in from Bill D.
Nice.
And he asks, I struggle to network and connect with people. This leads me to being alone, ignored, and not having any support in my creative projects. How can I build a circle of confidants for my endeavors, or just make more friends?
Nice. And you know what, Bill, one of the things I love about my network is a lot of them are friends. So they might have started out in my network but have become friends. And it sounds to me, Bill, maybe you're a little bit more on the introverted side, which means that you don't necessarily respond vocally first. You might think about things internally before you share, and know that there's been a lot of great research about the value add of introverts in this world. Susan Cain has written some fabulous books around that topic. So, I always say, and definitely Sophie talked about this as well, bring your strengths. So the strengths of an introvert are that they do think deeply, and so you can share that. You don't have to be vibrant and out there like some of the extroverts. Nothing wrong with extroverts either. It's just bring your strengths to the conversation. And I'd start small. So maybe start conversations with people that you admire, or people that are doing work in the fields that you admire, and just sort of, it could start by liking their posts, maybe sharing their posts with a comment, or maybe just including a comment, or over time reaching out to that person. A lot of people, I use LinkedIn a lot of people connect with me on LinkedIn. Don't be like some of them, which is love to connect with you. We connect, and then they're like, I want to sell you all these things. It's like, no, that's not how we build networks. What we do when we build really good networks is we share first. So share something. It might be an article, might be a video, a podcast or something, or just even your insights, or, thanks for them putting out whatever it is they've put out. And then over time, just keep that conversation going at a pace that works for you and them. So it doesn't have to be frantic. It can be just a nice, considered thing. And then look at people that they also are connected with. And again, keep looking at different disciplines, because there might be other people in other areas you've not come across before that can help grow the depth of what you know as well, because you're looking at different disciplines. And that was something that Sherry Mylordis shared in that particular podcast that we did. So I'll add to what Sophie said. But you know what? Start small, but start now.
Absolutely. And that's kind of triggered something in my mind that I saw the other day, which was it was a video on like an easy way to sort of, I guess, become a little bit more who you want to be and find more people that you want to do. Is you just try and think, who do I want to hang out with, and what are those people probably doing in a week? How can I be at those events? Like, say if I like music, how can I be at more gigs that is the similar genre that I want to like, and then the people that you like may be there, So just, I guess that's another way to do the friendship part, not necessarily the networking part.
I love that.
Awesome. Yeah. Any final thoughts on the conversation with Sophie today, or connecting globally?
So for me, your networks are really critical, particularly if you want to be a really good adaptable leader. They'll give you access to intel that you won't get in other ways, and come with the spirit of being generous, being authentic. And it's about how can you support them and serve them. And the more generous you are, the more you find that generosity comes back. So don't go in to take, but actually go in to be really generous and serve your networks. Because ultimately, to be adaptable, you can't do it all by yourself. So your networks are a great support. Thanks, Jez.
No problem, and thank you, Danette. So everybody, we've got one more episode left in this series. It's an amazing one next week. It's going to be talking about AI and values and everything, how they come together in a great conversation. But until next week, thanks everybody for sharing, for listening, and as always, have a magical week.
Thanks, Jez. Thanks, everyone.